Welcome to Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. This is where the subjects are audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Joe Reed, and with me is Stephen Cummings, and he's here to talk about books that are centered in dark academia. Tell me about your book, Stephen.
This genre is wide-ranging. It's very broad. It's a little controversial because there's a lot of discussion about, well, what actually constitutes dark academia. So I'll just give you my definition and we'll just roll with that.
Sure.
It seems like it's a kind of just, it's an aesthetic. You can think dark, dimly lit hallways on a campus or some institution of learning. Secrets are hidden. There's study rooms. Maybe there's a professor's office. Maybe that door locks. I don't know. The walls are covered in books. There might be some candles and a few gargoyles. The subgenre seems to include fantasy elements, and we have at least two examples of that today. But they're not a requirement. I think of Donna Tartt. A Secret History gets listed a lot as the eminent example of this genre, and that does not exist in a fantasy place. That's just a title I'm throwing out there as an example of where this seems to be built around. And there are a couple of other titles out there. ML Rio's If We Were Villains, one I listened to a number of years ago, really enjoyed. I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay. That's another great example that seems to show up on these lists as well there. I will say, too, that I really enjoy this genre because as somebody who works in higher education, to have a genre that sort of at least has a deference to higher education and its purpose, regardless if there's dragons or gargoyles or whatever. These institutions seem to be functioning well, and I find that to be comforting when I'm reading these books as well. So it's a bit of humor, just take that as you will, but that's where I'm going with this.
So tell me about the three books you're talking about today. What are they?
Today we're going to talk about 3 audiobooks. The first one is KATABASIS by R.F. Kuang, read by Morag Sims and Will Watt. Seduction Theory by Emily Adrian, read by Jennifer Pickens, and The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, read by Zara Ramm.
All right.
Let's start with KATABASIS. Now, this one I was excited to get into because, quite frankly, the buzz around this one was pretty intense, or at least it felt that way for a number of months. R.F. Kuang, she has written a number of books already in multiple genres, so she's got a lot of stuff on her CV now. Her audiobooks routinely receive earphones awards, so it just seemed like I couldn't wait to get into this one. By the way, she's a PhD candidate at Yale right now.
By the way, not even 30 years old.
Not even 30.
Not even 30 in, 6 books? This is just, I'm not bitter.
I'm not bitter either. I want to know
impressed.
more. One of these days, she needs to just write her our autobiography just so we learned how she did it.
She'll probably do that at 32. Anyway, go ahead.
This is the first time I've listened to one of her audiobooks, so again, very excited to do this. And it fits the dark academia theme for sure. In this story, there are 2 doctoral students. Their names are Alice and Peter, and they're both studying magic at Cambridge. Now, it's set in a real place, but at Cambridge, they're studying magic. They decide to open a portal to hell. Now, why would you do that? Well, they're doing it because they're pursuing their advisor, who apparently was sent to hell. And there's a whole story there. And they're going there to rescue him, but really, I believe they're going there to get his recommendation because they're on the job market and they need to get the best recommendation possible. So the stakes are understandable.
And it's so believable.
Yes.
So believable. From the time I've spent on university campuses, you're working on a PhD and you have a really good advisor or an advisor that can mean you get a job, you definitely would go through the gates of hell for that.
From my experience, this is a very accurate sentiment. And quite frankly, this particular book, while it does have all of the usual elements of fantasy and dark academia, really has an element of, among other things, a kind of satire about the experience of being a PhD student on a campus. So it captures that dark underworld, but it's a satire. Peter, one of the 2 students who go to hell, notes at one point, oh, I get it. Hell is a campus. And I thought that was a really apt way of describing it. As you get into this, too, there's a lot of critique about the nature of the relationships among faculty and students. And again, not to reveal too much, but that's something that really propels the story along.
I absolutely agree. It's like Kuang takes the college campus and makes it the literal hellscape.
I really appreciated the performances here too. So Morag Sims, she performs Alice Law. She's crisp, smart, she's methodical, she's very ambitious. But as the performance progresses, she captures not just any insecurities that Alice might have or try to hold close, but she also gets into more discussion about the struggles she's having with her advisor, which is part of the theme of the story here. Now, Will Watt conveys Peter, who at first seems to just be somebody who gets things handed to him, seems rather privileged in that way. But his story is also complex. So let's just say he's more than just one dimension.
Why don't we hear a little bit? Who are we going to hear from and set this up?
So this will start out, this clip, I believe, is going to be the voice of Morag Sims performing Alice Law. And it basically just kind of gives you a nice setup to the story. I'll just leave it there.
Okay, and this is KATABASIS by R.F. Kuang.
Cambridge, Michaelmas term, October. The wind bit, the sun hid, and on the first day of class, when she ought to have been lecturing undergraduates about the dangers of using the Cartesian severance spell to revise without pee breaks, Alice Law set out to rescue her advisor's soul from the 8 courts of hell. It was a terrible, gruesome accident that killed Professor Jacob Grimes, and from a certain point of view, it was her fault. And so for reasons of both moral obligation and self-interest, for without Professor Grimes she had no committee chair, and without a committee chair she could not defend her dissertation, graduate, or apply successfully for a tenure-track job in analytic magic. Alice found it necessary to beg for his life back from King Yama the Merciful, ruler of the underworld.
I am a big fan of Morag's voice. I love that slight huskiness that she has, and I think she's somebody who does observational narration so well. And I think she really gets into and conveys the spirit of this book, because there's a lot of glee, I think, that Kuang exhibits in writing this book.
Yes, and I think that wit comes through without being too pointed around the nose. And I think Morag does this fantastic job conveying all of that. So you don't feel overwhelmed by things, but you also feel like these are real people going through a real thing that's happening. And that's a lot to do. And it's an 18-hour book. So
Yeah.
you're along for a very long but very very fascinating ride. So yeah, I really enjoyed her performance as well.
And shout out to Will Watt, who we didn't hear, but really does an excellent Peter. And it's an Earphones winner.
It is an Earphones winner, absolutely.
All right, your second book, Seduction Theory.
Now, this one is by, again, Emily Adrian, read by Jennifer Pickens, shorter by a note. It's 5.5 hours long, but also very enjoyable. This also, of course, takes place in higher education. No magic here, so just FYI, no fantasy. But it's up to the listener. From what I took from this, it's up to the listener to sort out what is real and what is perhaps a more subjective point of view. And here, the elements of keeping secrets, passions running high among faculty and students contribute to this overall dark academia genre.
And again, we see the challenging relationship that can often develop between a graduate student and her advisor.
Indeed. And I will just say that in the world that we live in, those are ethical concerns for sure.
Yeah.
But given the fact that this is a fiction novel, the fiction audiobook, it's just fascinating, and again walks into that dark academia world pretty vividly. Here, it's told through an MFA thesis. That's a Master of Fine Arts thesis. And that's, side note, a lot of stories in the genre of dark academia seem to center around the humanities. Go figure. And in here, Robbie is the graduate student, and she's completing a work on the subject of infidelity. Now, this inspiration may be based on actual events. Her advisor, Simone, has with her kind of an emotional relationship that suggests something is going on. In the meantime, Simone's husband, Ethan, is having an affair with the department secretary. So there is drama there.
Yes, indeed, there is.
That sounds like a soap opera. But again, the way this is written and the way it's performed by Jennifer Pickens doesn't feel that way at all. It feels very different. And it feels a little more like I said, of the space of dark academia. So that's why it's on this list today.
Yeah, I listened to this one, and boy, it definitely resists easy characterization. I think the book itself.
And I love that.
And talk about your unreliable narrator. I mean, and who owns being fairly unreliable? I mean, offering something and then taking it back. Well, that, yeah, would that had happened, but here's what happened. But did it? And so you're really off balance a lot, I think, as you're listening to this.
And that's one of the pleasures of this particular audiobook, one that I've certainly enjoyed. And a lot of credit in this audiobook, of course, goes to the narrator, Jennifer Pickens. And she does capture, again, the wit and intelligence of this environment. It was delicious. I don't necessarily like to use food metaphors, but I'm going to use one here.
Well, why don't we listen to a little bit?
This just basically is a nice setup for the environment. And that's it. We'll just start there.
All right. Seduction Theory by Emily Adrian, read by Jennifer Pickens.
At the creative writing department's end-of-year party, Ethan's secretary fed him kale with her fingers. Ethan wasn't supposed to call Abigail his secretary. Trouble was, Abigail often referred to herself as his secretary in wry subversion of the school's progressive values, and her jokes had eclipsed her actual job title in Ethan's memory. The party was crowded. Grad students were crammed into the kitchen, hoping their advisors heard them talking about sex. In the adjacent living room, academic spouses grew weary of discussing summer plans, as if everyone had summers off. Soon the house would overheat. Guests would spill into the yard, but for now stayed close to the collapsible buffet table on which they'd placed their offerings.
It's interesting, and I'll be honest, it took me a bit to adjust to her narration, which can be a bit languid at times, but I think it really suits the book. And I thought she really did a fabulous job. Once I got used to her narrative style, I really got sucked into the book.
I have a general index of giving every book at least 30 or so minutes just to make sure that am I going to connect with this or not. And by
Absolutely.
the time I hit that point, I'm usually in. And I found that to be helpful in this instance too. But that is no criticism per se of the choices that Jennifer Pickens is making here. I think she took the right path and made this the book that it is, the audiobook experience that it is, which is why we're talking about it today.
And the final book on your list of dark academe.
The last one on the list is called The Incandescent by Emily Tesh and read by Zara Ramm. This is an Earphones Award winner, and in my sense, this is probably the most recent example of what people probably think of when they think of dark academia. It is, first of all, rooted in a version of reality. In this case, it's Chetwood Academy. It's essentially a real place. Students are struggling with their adolescent anxieties. It's not a college. It's an academy. So you have a younger age group here. You have those students just going through the things that they're going through at their age. Teachers are just wanting to have time to do their jobs, do it well. But unfortunately, the school has a demon on the premises that has been awakened. And so fortunately, though, Dr. Walden, the main character here, is an exceptional demon wrangler.
So Chetwood Academy, as you say, in some ways very rooted in reality in terms of the experiences of students and teachers, but it's also a place where magic is taught.
Yeah, and I think the reason I'm making that distinction, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but you think about, say, the Harry Potter series. The Harry Potter series has a very delineated space between the people that are everyday people, and then you have the magical people, and those two worlds aren't supposed to necessarily collide too much. None of that's happening here. Much like KATABASIS, the world just exists, and the world just happens to have magic in it, and that's what we're capturing here. So I just want to capture this space here that we're in right now.
So it's a layered book. I mean, yes, there's magic going on, but do people who are teaching really see themselves in this book at the same time.
Yes, they do. This is a fantasy novel. This is a sapphic fantasy novel. So this two of the key characters, again, the Dr. Walden character and her lifelong crush, Laura, they both rely on each other throughout the story, particularly as they face off with demons that threaten the academy and, of course, the children that attend there. So there's definitely some stakes involved here. And Emily Tesh, the author, takes a lot of time describing the daily, just the daily minutia of the life of the teacher in this world. Now, I personally loved this. I've read some feedback on this book where some people would just say, I wish they'd stop talking about the teacher's lounge and just get to the action of it all. But that's, for me, I just liked how that rooted the world a little more into the space that we are familiar with. So, for example, the copy machine. I've made millions of copies in my life, less so these days. We're less reliant on such things. But the copy machine is problematic in the book, just like it is in real life. Although here, the copy machine actually is on strike because it's a sentient machine, because we're living in a world where this type of thing exists. So Zara Ramm's performance captures that exceptionally British instructor's tone. This was a delight for me as well, listening to what is essentially a no-nonsense approach to classroom management as well as fighting demons. There's a couple of passages that are more or less her stating, hey, that's quite enough of that, and taking care of business. And that also was one of the nice pleasures of this book as well. Another reason why I have it on this list today, just because I enjoyed it.
Well, let's listen to it. I want to hear Zara. Do you have to set it up?
I'll give a little bit of this one. This is where here the instructors are facing the presence of an incoming demon. This passage is a good example of what you're going to experience. This is the tone of the audiobook as a whole. So let's start there.
All right. The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, read by Zara Ramm.
Their new visitor was hard for Walden's magical senses to perceive clearly, in the way that an ocean is hard to comprehend by standing on the seashore. Walden felt the great cat's paw of its intentions land across the summoning array, which was, after all, only a fourth-order pentagram drawn by students, and start to force it further open. "No, you don't," she said, and by a solid effort of will managed to manifest a secondary pentagram, drawn in lines of pure force around their original array. She had lost track of where the sixth formers were. She prayed they had the sense to stay quiet and out of the way. "Laura!" Kenning was right underneath their new visitor. What was she doing? Oh, Walden realised a second later. She was trapped.
Well, first, I'm a fan of Zara Ramm. She narrates the Nosy Parker mysteries, which I started listening to because my friend has a cat named Nosy Parker. The reason one chooses books. And I think she's wonderful here. I mean, the way she just takes that narrative and is driving it forward with a lot of intelligence, I think.
I love that. Yes, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Sometimes you just need to have that confident presentation, that performance that really speaks to the character so deeply that regardless of where the story is going, and trust me, this is one of those stories that you're not sure where it's going to go, but you're in good hands. She's doing a really good job here.
And again, another earphones winner. Well deserved, in my opinion. Yeah, this is definitely high on my list. When I'm done with KATABASIS, I'm going to the Incandescent.
Fantastic. Love to hear that.
Stephen, such a pleasure, as always, and I'll talk to you next month.
Wonderful. Talk to you next month.
Support for Behind the Mic comes from Dreamscape, the publisher of The Intruder, by #1 New York Times bestselling author Frida McFadden. On sale October 7th. That's dreamscapepublishing.com. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart, Robin Whitten, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow and Coco McCracken are our editors. And the music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. And I'm your host, Joe Reed. Good listening.